Travis.
Hey,
Hi,
Jeremy.
Travis.
Hey, Janicza. How are you both doing?
Good, how are you?
Doing
Great.
well.
Thanks for taking time to talk with me about Zola. I remember this at Sundance last year, and I couldn't get into a screening because everyone was rushing to see it. So, but let's start. Let's start from the first time you guys read the Twitter thread, because I remember this time, and I couldn't understand. I think I was still kind of figuring out Twitter a little bit more, so to speak, and I didn't understand how a Twitter thread could blow up the way this one did. Janicza, let's start with you, and then Jeremy, I want to get your answer too. What were you thinking when you were like checking out this Twitter thread?
I thought, oh, I have to make this a movie. It was just so clear to me. And I haven't figured out the exact way to kind of paint this picture, but it just it wasn't a decision I made. It made me, it just was like, oh, so you're making it. Like it just told it to me. And I understood that this was going to be my next film. And it was the road that I had to be on. And I could also see it so clearly. I read it the day that it came out. I read it that evening, and I could see so many shots. I didn't have a sense of who was performing it, but I could see the photography so clearly. I could see Florida so clearly. I was like, we're shooting on film. I mean, I was already putting it together, and it still took 2 years to get to it. But I was like, oh yeah, this is my next movie. This is the thing I have to put myself into and do whatever it takes to get to it.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I was literally on Twitter at the time while this is happening. I'm consistently on Twitter. It's the bane and beauty of my modern existence, my Twitter feed. And I was watching it and I was actively engaging with it like while it was happening. So much so that Asia responded to me once and I was like, oh my God, she knows that I exist. And and I think that for me, it felt like some of the best writing I'd encountered in years, some of the most immediate writing, and like so mythic. Like I didn't understand how someone could make such a mythic figure of themselves so immediately. And I think that was one of the things that was so exciting to me about the thread itself, right? Was how immediately mythic and huge it was. And moreover, that same thing you're pointing to is one of the things that was really exciting to me, which was the sort of how of it all. Because I think that's one of the things that trips people up even now in the way they talk about the movie, is that there's still this like disbelief that someone could take a form that we all are using baby steps in and like run a full marathon in it, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of my next question, because it's like, how do you take something that it's 140 characters or whatever, and extrapolate it into a feature film? I know it's a long thread and everything, but it's still like a big undertaking. It seems like to me, Jeremy
But
or Janicza, but either one. Janicza, you first.
yeah, I felt the thread read like a movie. It read like the outline to a movie. In fact, at that point, I hadn't been outlining my own work, and I have to sort of be forced into doing an outline. I'm more of a write freely, and you get there and you figure out the shape. And so I felt the text had done so much of that legwork already. I mean, were you needing an outline? You just look at that, and it's so clear. There's very obvious to me. There felt like there was an obvious first act, second act, third act. You knew who the villain or the villains were. You knew who the good guys were. You knew where their heart stood. You had a sense of the suspense is also woven through it. And sometimes there's this question of like, how is there a whole movie there? And it's like, well, there just is. It's in the piece. It didn't require a lot of invention from us. There are these large gaps in the story, just like the road trip, for instance, the driving from Detroit to Florida, Detroit to Tampa, which is, I think, about an 18 or 19-hour drive. That is one tweet. So that's somewhere where you're like, okay, we're going to make 3 or 4 scenes out of this moment. But for the most part, it was all there. The source material is super rich and juicy, and we just fully leaned into what was right in front of us.
And what's funny, Jay, is that most screenplays, I mean, I feel like whenever anyone's like, how could it be a screenplay? I'm like, have you read most screenplays? Most of these things are horrible. Like most people cannot write. And like, you know, she's really, really phenomenal. And I think that in most screenplays, like she's innately talented at structure, right? And I think in most screenplays, they wouldn't have shown what happened in the truth. They're like, they got in the car, they got there. Now let's see the real hijinks happen. You know, we're the freaks for wanting that scene to have 3 extra scenes in it. But like, you know, one of the things that I thought about a lot when I was looking at it and thinking about it as a screenplay were how far in ahead she was in a 70s way. Like she like felt like a 70s screenwriter with just like beats on beats on beats, you know, in a way that like most of the modern screenplays I was reading on like the weird Dropbox links I was getting where I was like stealing things from studios were like not at all as contained or structured as this was.
Wow. When you talk about kind of filling in those gaps, how much did you work with Asia Zola to kind of capture the voice, keep the voice, you know, when you're creating something that's maybe a little bit new to the story, but kept keeping that voice? How much did you work together on that?
So when I officially got the film, we met through FaceTime, and I had her basically walk me through the thread, but independent of thread speak. Just speak to that experience and then ask questions in between. And the big thing was there were a couple. One, it was there anything here that you had left out that you wish was in the film now that we get to tell it in the film? And there's the question of who is Zola character? Because in a way, you know, Jeremy already spoke to this, that the script kind of felt, or the world of her, what she was putting together had a kind of 70s appeal.
Yeah.
And who I thought of in looking at this movie, I was like, this is sort of like having a conversation with blaxploitation, right? And this to me is a Pam Grier character. So we talked a lot about like who Zola was, and Asia, real Zola. The main thing for her was just what the woman we were going to cast was going to look like. It mattered to her that she be a woman who read Black and not mixed, for one. She really wanted that because she hadn't seen that. And again, I sort of go back to Pam Grier. And so that was our kind of big initial step. And then Jeremy and I worked on the script together. Then I did a director's pass, and then Asia got it again and sat with it and sent thoughts and feelings. And that was that process of putting together the story.
God, when you mentioned that, I totally could see Pam Grier in the role now.
Absolutely, right?
It totally feels like a 70s movie. Like
it's next to Coffee, it's next to Foxy Brown, it's
Yeah.
next to Cleopatra Jones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a, you know, I actually just recently watched Coffee again, and it kind of like doesn't make sense that she makes it out, right? But that's what's so exciting, is that there is a fear that she isn't going to get to the end. And by the end, she's a nurse by day. She's murdered all these people. And you're like, does she just go back to being a nurse? Or is she going to jail? Because I think she's killed 12 people, and one of them is a senator.
Right. What's hilarious too is that it's like Coffee written by Virginia Woolf or like Nella Larson, right? Like the woman who wrote Passing. Because like it's also deeply just about friendship, you know? And so she's like, let me tell you this chaotic story that is all about an arc of how 2 friends become immediate friends and then lose that friendship over 4 days. Like that's kind of beautiful and modernist in early 20th century, mixed with the sort of 70s wild, like, you know, like bikinis and guns aesthetic that she put inside of it. But she was really doing something that was like really deeply classic literature too. And so I'm like, oh, I love, you know?
Wow. Well, this was fantastic, you guys. The movie was an insane experience. I really enjoyed it. I loved it. Thanks a lot for you guys for taking some time with me. I really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Travis.
Best of luck to you both. Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're laying down, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest stuff.